yeah, at University of London, and co-founder and director of the Impro Robotics. And Piotr obtained his PhD from New York University, supervised by Professor Ian LeCun, and he also got the Outstanding Dissertation Award at that year. And he created Impro Robotics, a theater company where human actors and basically AI and robotics are joined together for the performance. So I guess he'll tell us more about that today with the title of Co-creating with AI in live theater performance. So let's welcome Piotr. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. So, this talk is going to be fairly different from, let's say, a neuroscience talk, because it will much focus on the intricacies of a brain. Instead, it will focus on the co-creative aspect of interaction between humans and machines. So, thank you for introduction. I'm delighted to be here talking about the artist in the loop, artificial intelligence modality, co-creating with AI. And we have seen many recent examples of interesting co-creation with AI. For instance, Kendrick Lamar transformed figures resembling O.J. Simpson, Kanye West, and others using deepfake AI technology in his music video. Or ChatGPT was used to co-write, very important, South Park. Or Paul McCartney said that he would use AI to create the final Beatles song ever, saying that we were able to take John's voice and get it pure through this AI. Or director Paul Trillo has used Stable Diffusion, Runway ML, and more recently, the most recent tool by OpenAI, to create various dreamy short films. And I'm sure that there are many more creative applications for AI to come, and they won't be limited to generation of text, audio mixing or mastering or generative images and video. I think that generative AI can assist in the development through ideation, through concept art and script writing, and many other areas of production. But what's very important is to keep the human centered in that creative process. So there are many AI tools available today. In open source or licensed way. And these tools may help reduce barriers, allow sharing, remixing, streamlining the creative process, and fostering creative exchanges. These tools are quite capable, but they come with serious concerns about bias and ownership, two issues that I will discuss later. But I would like to make this talk a little bit more personal. So as in for the introduction, I did my PhD in computer science at NYU with one of the founders of deep learning, Professor Ian LeCun. And during the day, I work as staff research scientist in AI at Google DeepMind. And I worked on reinforcement learning for robotic navigation. I worked on weather forecasting, climate forecasting. And at the same time, I've always been interested in machine learning for the real world. So since I am also a theater maker, an improviser, and the co-founder and director of a theater company called Improbotics, I'm going to argue that one can bring a researcher's mindset to theater and vice versa. And the main takeaway from this talk is that live human performance is a perfect testbed, an example of co-creation with AI, because it needs to empower artists to happen in a responsible way and to establish a dialogue between artists and technologists. So these are my personal thoughts about co-creating with AI tools and about working with this strange partner. And over the course of my investigations, I have set up to implement 3 desiderata for AI tools: balance between predictability and surprise, co-creation, and getting more and more capable. But I've also observed 3 outcomes and lessons: the need to embrace imperfections and limitations of AI, transforming AI into a creative challenge and even a performance training tool, and engaging the audience about ethics and participatory design, and keeping in mind participatory design with artists in the process. So as far as the desideratum, and like a good creative partner, I wanted the powerful AI tools to work for the human creator by being both reliable and surprising. And here I'm going to tell a bit of an origin story. A few years ago, actually 10 years ago, I used to work at Microsoft, building the second most popular search engine. And I used to work on query autocompletion, which is essentially about building predictive text. So as you start typing a query, autocomplete tries to finish the query for you. It uses a statistical model that suggests the most likely query you're going to type, and it makes suggestions based on the statistics of previous searches, as well as on context, location, time of the day. So far, so good. So in parallel to my career in science, I've been training and performing as a theater actor and improvisation comedian in various fringe theater productions. And I mentioned earlier, as when I was talking about theater acting, that there is a process that goes on in live performance. And actually, in improvisation, it is the vulnerability. Theater and comedy performed without a script. This is what improv is about. And an example of improvised comedy is, for instance, Whose Line Is It Anyway? Which you may have seen on television. So in general, improvisation, both in jazz music or on the theater stage, relies on practice. Performers need to adapt to the changing context of a scene and to listen to and to collaborate with other performers and with the audience, according to the famous yes and principle. And theater practitioners, Keith Johnston and Viola Spolin, insisted on spontaneity, meaning that improvisation is always about doing the most obvious thing. Does it sound familiar? Improvisers should not be in their head when performing. They should pay attention to what is around them. And it's when two actors meet, each of them doing the most obvious thing according to the mental model of the context, that interesting narratives emerge. And so there have been studies in neuroscience about the brains of musical improvisers, jazz musicians improvising. And I'm not a neuroscientist, but I'm just going to say what I remember, which is that the prefrontal cortex is less activated during improvisation. It's much less about making decisions and thinking about making decisions. And it's much more about just going with the flow and using one's own muscle memory and also all the cultural background. And so improvisers need to be able to be spontaneous and to get into a flow state that allows them to query all their cultural background to improvise well. And so in light of this, I had an epiphany. Improvisation and statistical language models and statistical machine learning in general have one thing in common, which is about doing the most obvious thing. And by making obvious choices, which are coming from slightly diverging viewpoints, a nerdy, vulnerable clown trying to converse with a toy robot. So I combined speech synthesis and speech recognition with a chatbot that I coded myself. And the AI consisted of a neural network trained on the dialogue from 100,000 films, which was enough to cover for the diverse comedic situations. I called the system Alex as an acronym for Artificial Language Experiment. And the audience would come and give suggestions, and I had to adapt and to improvise in response to whatever Alex would say. So I was trying to work with the robot, getting it to tell interesting and comedic stories. And of course, it was a hilariously impossible task. The AI at the time would keep generating absurd nonsense. Mind you, this was in 2016. I trained a char-RNN, recurrent neural network, on the dialogue from only 100,000 films, 1 billion tokens. That's nothing compared to today's language models. But we already observed something that we observed today, which is that the language model would hallucinate. So my task became to embrace the imperfections and limitations of the AI. And I had essentially built a glorified AI version of the exquisite corpse, which generates absurd nonsense. And I was not the only one to notice this. There had been a breakthrough in the development of large language models in 2015, and that prompted theater and movie directors to try using them to write scripts. Early experiments included song lyrics for the Western musical Beyond the Fence, movie scripts for Sunspring. Both were nonsensical. And they were made enjoyable only through heavy editing, curation, and interpretation by a large cast of human actors, director, choreographer who invented meaning and subtext for the AI output. Since then, there has been a marked improvement in the quality of large language models. GPT-2 was released in 2019, and Prague-based theater company Theater produced an absurdist one-hour-long play called AI When a Robot Writes a Play to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Karel Čapek's Or You Are, the play that introduced the word robot. And then a 100 times larger language model was released 2 years later, GPT-3, and employed to generate the script of a play at the Young Vic Theatre in London called AI, and also comedic short films. So in all these works, audiences and critics were quick to point out one unifying characteristic of that work is that the dialogue always seemed to be a bit absurd, and the artists would embrace the limitations. So the second, and perhaps the most important aspect of AI as a partner is co-creation. So during the process of creating Alex, I met Corey Matthewson, who was doing his PhD in robotics at the University of Alberta, and who since then joined me at Google DeepMind. So he was a like-minded researcher in AI and robotics who was a professional improviser at Rapid Fire Theatre. He had exactly the same idea as me. He had done also a show with a chatbot by himself. And even though we were living on opposite sides of a pond, we immediately connected, we started collaborating and became friends. And his motivation could be summarized in this sentence: good improvisers look good on stage, but the best improvisers make their partner look good on stage. So Corey wanted to apply this principle to AI and to make that special relationship symmetrical. So in early 2017, we started performing together in transatlantic shows across 7 or 8 time zones in 2 theaters, one in London, one in North America. That involved lots of robots and chatbots and tech. And of course, as you can imagine, sometimes it was a disaster. Speech recognition wouldn't work. Chatbots would generate nonsense. One of the robots once actually literally crashed and burned on stage. And I was sweating profusely during the performance. The reviewer was unimpressed and they wrote, "Never work with robots." Did we give up on our project? Of course, we did not. So first of all, we fixed the many technical processes in our show. And second, we used that opportunity as a creative challenge to redesign the show around human AI co-creation, reframing the show as a form of theater performance training. And despite initial bad reviews, Corey and I persisted and we created in 2018 a theater company with other actors called Improbotics. And in Improbotics, it is the human actors who deliver the AI-generated lines, because we noticed that it's the role of a human actor to give meaning to the absurd AI-generated text. So we decided to actually perform a live Turing test. It will be no longer robots who deliver the text, but humans who deliver the text, or humans who improvise normally. And in both cases, they had to add emotions, subtext, and timing. And the audience will need to tell apart the cyborgs from the other human actors. In order to increase the quality of AI-generated dialogue, we also introduced human controllers who would manually curate lines produced by the chatbot. And that approach allowed us to mitigate the many biases of language models, removing offensive content, using a combination of automated filters and human curation. So I mentioned the play AI at the Young Vic, which was an interesting example of a collaborative and interactive approach to AI script writing, because it involved the dramaturg, the actors, and the audience at the same time. And we actually had adopted a similar collaborative approach inside our theater company back in 2018. We led workshops with professional actors playing with chatbots, inviting them to deliver, curate, and reflect on the outputs of AI, on its creative capabilities, on its limitations. In addition to working in robotics, we had collaboration with other groups similarly interested in bringing chatbots on stage. As we persisted in our initial explorations on human-machine improvisations with chatbots, we went from being a human-machine duet featuring physical robots to become a company of several dozens of actors. And through improvisation, we let actors with non-technical backgrounds explore the possibilities of AI. And we also ended up publishing our findings in various human-computer interaction journals. And as a further axis of investigation, we built better tools for human-computer interaction including computer vision-based tele-immersive tools for rehearsing and performing in a form of augmented reality. And that happened actually during the pandemic, when everyone was at home. We gathered online in a virtual space that we built using green screens, and everyone would send their video with a green screen. And Boyd Branch, one of the cast members who was at the time doing a PhD in digital media design at University of Kent, designed a tool called Virtual Director that will allow us to be combined on the same screen. And we further investigated using that tool the effect it had on the Zoom fatigue and on the feeling of collaboration being present in the room somebody else. And we published both findings at SIGCHI. We also explored the use of AI-assisted live translation of improvised theater, playing on stage in different languages and using microphone systems and machine translation to project live translation for the audience, or even on augmented reality glasses for the performers, in order to build scenes that would allow actors to understand each other despite language differences, or, of course, to be comically misunderstood. And very importantly, we made a good show for the audience with enthusiastic reviews and reviewer scores that were increasing over time. And as a matter of fact, I would like to introduce this new metric for AI co-creative system, the number of stars in film and theater reviews. So Corey, the cast of Improbotics, and I managed to make AI outputs funny, thanks to human partners. But we also wanted to go slightly beyond in terms of AI capabilities, perhaps increasing its coherence. And so here I'm going to present some work that we did back 2 years ago, which was a different reality in terms of language models compared to today. But at that time, language models trained on vast text data sets would, and still today, predict the next word based on prior context. But they had limited context window size. The context window size 2 years ago typically was 4,000 words. Today, a Gemini Pro 1.5, released by Google DeepMind, has context of millions of words. So at the time, those language models faced limitations in applications like writing coherent text for like screenplays, theater scripts, because they would simply generate inconsistent narratives that would drift a long time, and because it would suffer loss of coherence. And of course, that would create an interesting, unique glitch aesthetic. But we wanted to go beyond that. So Corey and I, at this point, working at DeepMind, wanted to give answers to 2 questions. How can you generate more coherent stories, and are automated story generation tools any useful to creative artists? And so, employing language models, we built a system for writing screenplays and theater scripts. And we evaluated it by industry professionals working in film and theater, writers, directors, actors, producers. And to build our system, we went back to the classics. So in Poetics by Aristotle, Aristotle identified the plot as the most important part of a tragic story. And other elements would include the characters, the language or dialogue, the thoughts of the characters, which could also be the overall theme of a tragedy. And so our approach loosely incorporated all those elements in a hierarchical way. We would start with a logline, which is the short narrative summary, typically something that you find on Rotten Tomatoes if you look for descriptions of films, or on the back cover of a book. So it's like 2 sentences that contain the protagonist and the obstacle, or the main antagonist. And so we would start from a logline to build a system that interactively generates a title, and then that generates characters, and then generates plot points, and then location descriptions that meet the specifications in the logline, in addition to various causal dependencies using prompt chaining. So this is something that you can obtain today if you actually iteratively work with a language model, and you use the outputs of a language model to feed back into the language model to refine it. And so finally, once we generated that main structure of a plot and characters for each scene, the plot outline, the system would generate dialogue that satisfies all those previously generated scene specifications. And that hierarchical generation was designed to try to enable long-term semantic coherence. the plot would be summarized as a sequence of abstract scene descriptions, allowing the entire plot to fit within the language model's context window. And in practice, the way it looked was a Google Colab that we built and tested using, at the time, Google's DeepMind's language model called Chinchilla. We designed the tool to work for interactive co-writing. So that means that the process offered writers the possibility to edit, rewrite the text at multiple conceptual levels, at the level of characters, of plot, location descriptions, and dialogue, and iterate according to the principle that writing is rewriting. And the motivation for us was to have a co-writing experience that's both engaging and dialogic. So with that tool ready, we decided to address the second question. Are automated story generation tools like Dramatron any useful to creative artists, or AI outputs merely mediocre? And we therefore conducted a human-computer interaction study and an expert evaluation with the help of 15 industry professionals, playwrights, screenwriters, directors, producers, actors who had exposure to AI tools. They interacted with the system and responded to a survey to reflect on their interactive co-authorship session and consider the future uses of AI systems like Dramatron. And we asked 9 questions addressing ownership, pride, ease, expression, helpfulness, collaboration, uniqueness, enjoyment, and surprise. And a brief summary of those results revealed that participants responded more positively to questions about enjoyment and surprise than to questions related to ownership and pride in the output. Examining the collaborations aspect, which was a sore point, we segmented results based on the primary experience of the experts. And we noticed that film and TV writers who were accustomed to writers' rooms found the script writing process with AI more collaborative than theater script writing experts who were used to working alone. And so that suggests that AI-driven tools like Dramatron may offer more or less enjoyable and useful collaborative experiences depending on the user's professional backgrounds. We also followed this with qualitative evaluation through focus group discussions to reflect on the specific applicability of Dramatron to script writing. And on the positive side, some participants liked how hierarchical generation allowed the writer to work on the narrative arc, to iterate between interactive editing or letting the system generate. Writers also found that Dramatron could be used for world building, for inspiration, or simply for putting words on a page. But many of our participants also embraced the glitch aesthetic and the poetic absurdity of the outputs. On the negative side, some participants noted how the tool cannot write a complete story of its own due to logical gaps and due to the lack of common sense and of character motivation. And we also found that Dramatron outputs often lacked nuance and subtext. Some participants noted that creating theater is not always a linear and story-driven process, and that since Dramatron is inherently more formulaic by construction, it may be more suitable to screenplays, for instance, Netflix. So joke aside, this study was conducted in the summer of 22, which was before the release of ChatGPT and before the tool became to public consciousness, and people started experimenting since then. So we've all probably heard about the various possibilities and limitations of ChatGPT. You probably have been using it to grade your students' essays, or maybe not, or to write job application letters. And you may have noticed that the output was fairly mediocre. So here, those artists came exactly those same conclusions a few months earlier before the release of ChatGPT. But there are, of course, different ways of using the outputs of such large language models. And one of the participants was directing a series of plays at the Edmonton Fringe Festival. And he was running this show that consisted in actors getting scripts in a craft envelope discovered on the night of a performance. So they had no idea what the script was about. And they would have to read through the play, improvise, well, basically perform it while reading it. And halfway through the show, they would have to discard the script because it would just run out and continue fully improvising the theater script that they had established in the first half of a show. And so here, Dramatron was used to co-write 4 scripts that were produced and staged at that theater festival in that specific format. And so that combined a team of professional improvisational actors, a theater writer and director, with scripts co-written by Dramatron. And you can see here how this looks like in practice. So at the beginning, the actors all reading the script generated by AI, and they even all given costumes discovered on another performance. But halfway through, they have discarded the scripts and they just continue in the world that they have established. So audiences and reviewers who were aware of Dramatron's involvement in the process provided generally positive feedback. Reviewers praised the human actors for expertly adopting Dramatron's voice and seamlessly transitioning to off-script improv, much to the delight of the enthralled audience. But before conducting our study, we identified 3 directly relevant risks and ethical implications. First, the bias and offensive language in the generated output. Second, the automation of creative work, resulting in cannibalizing creative economies. And third, reusing copyrighted data from the training dataset knowingly or unknowingly. Of course, this was rather prescient since we've had a lot of discussions and lawsuits in the meantime since then. And so our personal mitigation strategy was twofold. First of all, we would always invite the creative human artists into the loop throughout the co-authorship process. And you also maintain clarity and transparency on the origin of a generated text. Also, the writer would always query short parts of a script using a search engine and plagiarism detection tools. That's the best way for now to ensure that you're not effectively doing something that already exists. So Dramatron was designed nearly 2 years ago, and our HCI study was done in the summer of 22. It was published in 23, and a lot of things have happened since then. And now I'm reaching the conclusion of this talk. I believe that we must craft a responsible creative future together by inviting experts into the designing process, by listening to their feedback, their concerns, taking their guidance into account. We should advocate for transparency in human AI co-creativity. The entire process can and should be human-centric. Research, development, design, deployment, dissemination should be done with empathy for those affected and impacted by the tools and technologies. And consent is key to participation in this co-creative process. We can empower artists with opt-out or withdrawal or refusal to participate processes. When working with artists in the co-creative development process, we can acknowledge and credit the contributions of those artists and respect the rights to their intellectual property. And there's also the question of fair compensation. So in summary, I believe that AI could be used as a tool for co-creation and performance, including live theater performance, but if and only if the artist and the performers wish to do so. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Piotr, for providing such a nice perspective of how humans and robotics or AI in general can work together on more of the art side. So, any questions from the audience? Yeah, probably I'll start the question. So, yeah, as I know you are a trained actor, a professional one, and just wondering, during your work, have you ever found any like interesting inspirations even from like working with this robotics or AIs and something that you as a professional actor even have never think about?
Yes, that was actually due to the limitations. We used the tool for actor training because it had delays. And the delays allowed the actors to focus on what was in front of them, the other actor. So we would basically practice with an actor delivering lines from AI, and those lines were given to them via an earpiece, but they could not say a word before hearing something coming from the machine. And in that time, which could be several seconds, they had to focus on what was the most important, which was the subtext of the discussion and what was in front of them.
That's interesting. Any other questions from the audience? Yeah, please.
Many thanks for the talk. Do you have any intuitions about how the improvement of the language models correlate with surprises and unexpected improvisations? So are the worst models better for improvisation than the best models?
I used to believe that worse models are in a way better because they provide with more opportunities for that glitch. At the same time, this has to be put as in balance with the audience expectations and even the actors' expectations about AI capabilities. So specific shows and scenes that you could do 5 years ago, which relied a lot on absurdism, or what we made out of the nonsensical output from the AI into being absurdist, is a bit more difficult today. At the same time, there is something that's really inspiring that comes from more potent language models. And that is when the creativity of the actor really gets carried through forward further, thanks to the right suggestions of the AI coming at the right time. And I think it's a bit of here. It's not only a question of what if a language model gets better, if it as a partner, if it helps the actor go further in the scene, but it's also how the interaction takes. What is the modality of interaction? So we've experienced with a lot of user interfaces, for instance, with radios, but that creates a delay, and the actor has to listen to the lines. But recently we started using augmented reality glasses, where the actor actually has the line in front of them, or has multiple lines, and then they can make a choice. They can decide they can read much more quickly, and then they can make a choice and pick the better line.
Thank you very much for the talk. I presume that one of the exciting things about improv, as opposed to a scripted performance, is that things could change based on how the audience is reacting to the content. Have you considered, or have you ever tried feeding back some information on how the audience is receiving things back to the AI as a sort of trading signal or something?
Oh, that's interesting. So no, we haven't done that directly. There is, however, work done by a professor, Naomi Fitter, who is at Oregon State University, I believe, who has been doing stand-up comedy with a robot. And here, the feedback going into the timing of a robot and the delivery of a robot was coming straight from a laugh meter. Or a clap meter. So basically measuring the acoustics, the strength of the acoustic signal in the comedy club to inform whether the audience likes the joke or not. And based on that, the robot would repeat or move forward.
Nice.
Great. Any other questions? If no, let's thank Piotr again for the great talk.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the talk. Okay, then we'll have a quick coffee break, and we'll come back at around 11:30, and then we'll join another great talk from the computer science side from UB. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Enjoy the conference.